Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey. Mr. Healey, good morning to you. Your thoughts, first of all, if I may ask you, on how the government, the British government, is dealing with this.
Well, the first priority is to get safely all British nationals and those Afghans who've worked with us over the years out of Kabul, and the government has our full Labour support in doing that. The second priority is to know from the government what's the plan through the United Nations, the G7, through NATO, to try to secure the gains over the last 20 years in Afghan society, to ensure that the international aid keeps flowing to avoid a humanitarian crisis, and to prevent Afghanistan again becoming a haven for terrorists. And the British foreign policy and leadership has gone missing in action in recent weeks, and this is the importance of the recall of Parliament. There are serious questions, as Stuart Ramsey was just saying, that we need to know the answers to.
Can we do business with the Taliban?
Well, the Taliban has now become the government again in Afghanistan. It's really important that individual countries don't leap to recognise and deal with them. It's important that any dealings with the Taliban, it seems to me, are coordinated internationally, probably through the United Nations. But we will have to recognise the fact that the reality now is that the Afghan government with whom we've worked and we did so much to support, including the support of our troops in Afghanistan over 20 years, has been overrun by the Taliban. And the speed and scale of the Taliban advance, the strength of the Afghan government and their forces has been badly underestimated by Western strategists. And it's left us with this dire, dreadful situation that we've been seeing unfolding in the last couple of days.
So we can do business with the Taliban?
Internationally, every country is going to have to deal in some way with the Taliban. If we want to try and secure the undertakings we've given to the Afghan people, withdrawing our forces but not walking away from the country or its people, then this is the government that the international community is going to need to deal with, but it should be done in a coordinated way. The UK has a special responsibility to Afghan and Afghan people, and I'd really like to see a great deal more being said and done by our British government to try and lead those efforts to secure the gains over the last 20 years and also ensure that Afghanistan doesn't plunge again into a humanitarian crisis.
I think we're already there, aren't we? Certainly there's an awful lot of people trying to leave the country, as one would anticipate. 20 years ago, 41,000 Afghan refugees were allowed to resettle in the United Kingdom. One can only imagine it's going to be more than that this time. Should we open our arms to them?
This is really desperate for the Afghan people. It isn't just they're fearing for their way of life. Many are fearing for their lives themselves. And really, I think when women, civic leaders, academics, journalists are fearing for their lives, I think it's unthinkable and shameful that Britain wouldn't be willing to say, we'll look at offering you safety. Canada has already made the commitment to take 20,000 Afghan refugees. And I want to hear on Wednesday from the Prime Minister that Britain is willing to step up in that way too, and demonstrate that we have our responsibility to the Afghan people and we're not walking away from them now.
Do you have a figure in mind?
No, I want to hear what the government's got to say, and I want to hear that commitment from the government. They're the ones with the information. They're the ones in the position to make the decision. But it's part of what must be an internationally coordinated effort that is a real challenge and test for British international leadership now on keeping aid flowing, on dealing with the looming refugee crisis, on preventing this country returning to being a safe haven for terrorism, and also ensuring that the Taliban are very clear. If there are human rights abuses or atrocities, they will be monitored, they will be tracked, there will be severe sanctions. We've got to do everything we can in this desperate, dreadful situation now to demonstrate that we can help try to secure the gains that Afghan people have seen over the last 20 years since we first went in 2001.
It's always tricky, isn't it? Because sanctions, of course, hit those hardest that have got least. Of course, you'll be discussing that on Wednesday when the House reconvenes for the day, but without a vote, I believe, at the end of it. Just a thought before I let you go. Do you have a view on the Foreign Secretary being out of the country while this was developing? Do we all need a holiday, or should he have been at his desk?
The problem is not the Foreign Secretary and whatever holiday he has and hasn't had. It's the absence of any British Foreign Office plan or leadership, dating back particularly to 18 months ago, when Trump first signed the agreement with the Taliban to make the commitment to withdraw. We should have been making sure this was a graduated withdrawal. We should have been trying to make sure that this reflected the conditions on the ground. We should have been rallying NATO allies to try and ensure that the Afghan people did not feel we were walking away from their country. And we should have been putting in place the sort of plans to ensure that aid can keep flowing and that we can now deal with the refugees that may well come from this crisis.